Started. Welcome so much for being here. I'm Lauren Carey. I'm really glad you're here with us today. My guest is Carey Shofner. Carey is the board president of Palmetto State Abortion Fund and co-founder of Midlands Defensa. And she is one of the people doing the work that makes a concrete difference in people's lives in South Carolina right now. Since 2021, Palmetto State Abortion Fund has helped more than 2,000 people access abortion across South Carolina and the Southeast. They help facilitate things like paying clinics directly for medical care. They cover travel, all of those that I'm going to let Carey kind of expand upon. But this organization operates in a region where abortion access continues to be restricted, and the barriers are financial as much as they are legal. So this work is actually incredibly essential, pretty much, life or death. We have a lot to cover today, so we're going to talk also about the legislative landscape in South Carolina. I can't wait to have Carey speak to Senate Bill 1095. I know that's actually being heard as we are doing our live right now in the medical committee, and what it means for abortion access in IVF. And then finally, we're going to talk about the intersection of reproductive rights and trans rights, what's happening on the ground in Columbia. And then we'll briefly touch on Midlands Gives, a fundraiser that I hope if you're seeing this, you can help go support Palmetto State Abortion Fund. So with all of that being said, Carey, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for this chat.
Yeah, I've definitely been looking forward to it for quite a while. So, would you mind telling us a little bit about Palmetto State Abortion Fund and how you specifically came into this work?
Yeah, so Palmetto State Abortion Fund was founded at the end of 2021 and funded or founded with the intent to help remove barriers for people accessing abortion care in South Carolina. I joined in early 2022. I was their very first volunteer, and it's been incredible to watch it grow. Like I said, we're focused a lot on the financial aspect of helping people access their abortion care, but we also help, like you said, with logistical support. About 90% of our callers these days are having to travel to another state to receive abortion care just because it's so restrictive here. So, helping with things like hotels, flights, food, sometimes even childcare vouchers, helping people out just to remove as many of those barriers as possible. And with our growth, we've been able to expand outside of South Carolina. So, we now serve South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, all states that have near total or total abortion bans. So it's just been really cool to, watch us grow. I always say I wish we didn't have to exist, but I'm glad that we can for now. And that we've been able to be a part of so many people's stories and work with so many incredible other abortion funds and organizations and clinics across the country.
Yeah, and something I've been seeing just since covering this work since 2022 is a lot more abortion funds and reproductive organizations cross collaborating across state lines because so many people are now traveling outside of their state that a lot of organizations are starting to come together, forming coalitions or working cooperatively together to get people care. So the day that we are out of a job will be, I think, the happiest day of my life. I'll be shutting down
Absolutely.
my Substack. I will be enjoying people getting care that they need and want.
Yes.
So I've seen the number that, PSAF has helped more than 2,000 people access abortion care. What does that number represent on the ground in terms of what people are actually navigating, to get there?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about, what people are navigating as they're trying to access their care in the South. One thing that I think that a lot of people are facing is just fear and uncertainty. So many people don't know what their rights are, what the law even is. We have so many people call and are like, I know abortion's illegal in South Carolina. And we're like, well, hold on. Like,
Yes.
we do have the 6 week heartbeat bill. So there's just a lot of fear around. They don't know where to start. They don't know, like I said, what the law and what their rights are. There's also a lot of stigma that still comes with abortion, with seeking abortion care. They're worried about family or friends finding out. So it's also really important to us, and I think all abortion funds, to practice really strong privacy standards, and offering that to people, like, we're going to give you assistance and we're also going to protect your privacy, not you know get more information than we need from you. um, the majority of, of our callers, like I said, have to travel to another state, and uh, I think it was like 80 something percent of our callers from last year were already parents.
Yes.
So in addition to just the fear of the unknown and how they're going to make this happen, it's also, okay, now I have to find childcare.
Yeah.
Now I have to, if I have a job, I have to worry about getting the day off or taking off a couple days. And if I'm going to do this at home, I have to, is there somebody who can help me? And so
Yes.
there's just so many things, and we've really tried, especially I think over the last 2 years at the Abortion Fund, to also be a space of education and either connecting people with other resources in their area that can help guide them through, or just us ourselves giving them the information they need so that they feel secure and they know what to expect and they know how to take care of themselves.
And I'm really grateful you brought the insight up about how many people seeking abortion care are already parents. It was something I wanted to talk about when you mentioned the child care vouchers, because the majority of people who seek abortion care are already parents.
Mhm.
And that's something that not, I think, people who are not in this industry or in this niche understand is it's not booking a flight and going on a 2 day or like a 3 day long weekend or whatever, getting the care you want and coming back home. It's financial restraints, it's logistical constraints, it's all of these things inhibiting
Mhm.
people just to get medical care. And so what you guys do is so in the nuance of addressing every barrier that could inhibit someone getting care. And that's really why I hope any viewer who's watching this donates and supports your organization, because it's not, raising money to do something arbitrary that might move the needle. You're actually on the ground. You're making
Yeah.
a difference in people's day-to-day lives and giving people the opportunity to have freedom over their life and their life choices. I mean, I can't understate that enough. That's actually incredibly important. That's done in the South.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely being able to gives so much back to these people who need it, and who, I think it's such a misconception. We think of like abortion stories, especially the way they're portrayed on media, that it's like teenagers or young single people, and not that obviously there isn't, that doesn't isn't happening, but it's so much more often parents
Yes.
already. I also volunteer as a greeter at our local abortion clinic, and I see it even with people coming in, and they're coming in with their small children, and it's I think people would be shocked if they really knew
Yeah.
who was getting abortions and how many barriers are in their way. And most people, or a large percentage of people who seek out abortion care, it's for financial reasons.
Yeah.
And so then when we throw in all these additional barriers of, oh, you have to go to multiple appointments, or you have to have counseling, or you have to travel, it just all makes it more and more difficult, and it's intentional.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's exactly. It's there to inhibit getting care. And I really just want to touch on this because I think it highlights who you are and how mission driven you are. But I would really love to talk briefly about how you co-founded Midlands Defensa, because it goes to show how greatly you care about community. Um, when you creating this or helping to found this entity, I don't know if it's an organization yet or what it is, but what gap were you trying to fill, and how does that kind of connect with PSAF?
Yeah, so Midlands Defensa came around in end of November, and we were in South Carolina starting to see an uptick in ICE presence across the state, but specifically in the three larger cities. And there wasn't a resource here in Columbia. There were hotlines in Greenville and in Charleston. And it really just came about organically that a group of organizers came together and were like, hey, we can probably do something about this.
Yeah.
And so, with the help of the other hotlines and with the ACL, our local ACLU group, we were able to like get something to get something together and get it going. And we just had a really engaged community. We had, we were hosting interest meetings and having 100 people show up, 200 people show up, and who were eager to learn about what was happening, learn about how to protect their neighbors, but also like wanting to get involved
Yeah.
and help out. And so now a lot of what we do is educating the community on their rights, whether they are an immigrant or not, or a refugee, knowing their rights, knowing how to correctly identify ICE or immigration, border patrol. And letting people also the resources around them, because there are resources available to people if a family member is picked up and you need help finding them, or you need legal help, or you're afraid to leave your house and you need somebody to bring food or groceries.
Yeah.
um, all those things, there are organizations that are here to help, so helping to also kind of bridge that gap, as well, is something that we've really been trying to focus on.
Yeah. And I'm really wanting to talk about this. I haven't written any long form articles about this, but when ICE was being deployed to democratically run states, I got a lot of texts like, oh, well, it's nice that you don't have that in your state or whatever. And I just was so frustrated when I hear that, because we've had them deployed in our state far before they went to Minnesota or other states. The difference is we don't get ground coverage on it.
Right.
And
And it looks so different in South Carolina than it does
yeah,
in some of these Democratic states, where they are trying to kind of make a spectacle of it, and
yeah,
they're intentionally making it a big deal.
yes,
Whereas I think in red states, at least in my experience in South Carolina, it's very targeted. It's
yes,
very in and out. I always tell people, we got a call one day of an ICE presence at a grocery store 4 minutes from my house. And by the time we got the call and I was able to leave my house and get there, they were all already gone. I
yeah.
mean, it's that quick.
So, and that's what I'm seeing in the South when I talk to other organizers and advocates in the immigration space, because I know I can speak in Florida. They've partnered with our sheriff's office. So our sheriff's
Mhm.
office has jurisdiction over the highways. And why is that important? Because legally, ICE can't pull you over. So by partnership with the sheriff's office, they now are able to pull people over legally. And what I'm seeing also in the South, so it's more of like, we see a lot of stops on the highways, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that individual was speeding, was ticketed for driving relation. Not the case. We get a lot of
Mhm.
issues here in the South because communities are so, I think, segregated still and sequestered in different parts of the state. A lot of times people don't know what's going on. It is so under the radar. It is so fast. But please know, whoever's watching this, ICE is in all of these red states. It's not a
Mhm.
blue state thing because of a governor's political affiliation. They're in the southern states and they work fast. And that's where a lot of the detention camps are as well, is
Mhm.
here in the South. So there's so much intersectionality with reproductive justice and immigrant rights. And, like we're going to be speaking about trans rights, you know, LGBTQ plus rights, the intersectionality, all of this is reproductive rights. So immigrant rights are reproductive rights. Um, but I wanted to briefly highlight that work as well so that it can also, get some airtime and attention, because that's just you seeing a problem and acting on it. I just will never stop speaking the praise of people who do that. I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk more about the legislative landscape now. I know you've been at the State House already this week, and in South Carolina right now is something people I think really should be paying attention to, and that is Senate Bill 1090. What is that? 1092, I think, is the bill.
95.
1095. Could you go ahead and speak about what it is, kind of the process, and where we're at with it today?
Yeah, so 1095 is a total abortion ban with no exceptions for rape, incest, fatal fetal anomalies. The exceptions that exist for life of the mother are very narrow. And so, in addition to that, I mean, I could talk just for an hour on this bill because I've had to look over it so many times. But there's a lot of criminalization parts to this bill that criminalizes not just providers, which is what we've seen in the past, but also the pregnant person themselves and anyone who aids and abets or helps somebody access abortion care.
Yeah.
There are parts of the bill that could make it that even sharing like a website could potentially be criminalized. You could be, do jail time for that. Which, we're, as the board president for an abortion fund puts us in a really sticky situation if this bill continues to move forward. So this bill was introduced on April 1st, which is very late in the session. Our session ends, like the first week or so of May. So it was introduced very late in the game. We had no idea what was coming. And it's already passed through the Senate subcommittee and had its first Senate full committee meeting this morning. They've adjourned. I don't know if they're going to pick it back up this afternoon or wait until next week. But if it moves forward from there, then it'll obviously go to the Senate floor for a vote before it moves over to the House.
Yeah.
Uh, this bill is a little scarier for us just because it's not getting a ton of attention.
Yeah.
And I think that because it is the end of session and people are kind of worn down and stuff, which
Yeah.
like valid. Um, it's harder to get people to engage and to call and stuff. So we have a 6-week ban right now, which is already making our job as an abortion fund to try to help people get the care they need really difficult. Very few people know before 6 weeks if they're pregnant. And if
Right.
even if you do know, trying to get an appointment, again, childcare, day off work, all that within a 2-week time frame is really hard. This would get rid of even that so that almost all abortions are illegal. And so we're really trying to just bring attention to this bill and get people engaged and really put the heat on these South Carolina senators.
Yeah, and something about what you said regarding providers giving care, right? We saw this legislation pass in Texas. And I spoke with Raven, president of Avow Texas, who is directly addressing access to care with providers. But what this type of legislation does is it has an undertone of surveillance,
Yeah.
because you speak about sharing access to resources. As of right now, Plan C is still able to ship medication abortion to all states in the United States as of America, as of today of this live. And what it would mean to start inhibiting people from sharing information would include surveillance, a lot of infringements on free speech, a lot of things on, religious freedoms. So it's very innocuous. It's not, it's on its face, it's scary, absolutely. But when you start turning policy into procedure and operations, it starts getting incredibly concerning. So I really can't underscore that enough, what this would mean in practice. And even people
Yeah,
who want to be pregnant, you know,
absolutely.
how this would monitor them. Like that's, I don't think enough of what gets talked about.
Yeah, and I mean, the medications, there a provision of the bill is criminal or reclassifying mifepristone and misoprostol, which are used in abortion medication. They're part of the abortion medication protocol. But they're used for tons of other things too. They're used for postpartum hemorrhaging. They're used for miscarriage treatment. They're used to treat stomach ulcers and Cushing's disease. And I even read that one of them can be used to help with with alcoholism treatment and
Yeah.
stuff. So they're used for so many different reasons. They're safe. They've been around for decades. There's over 100 studies that talk about their efficacy and safety.
Yeah.
Uh, but exactly like you said, the reason they want to reschedule these medications and to make them harder to access is because they don't want them shipped into the state. They want you to have to come to a doctor, to a clinic where they're probably going to be standing outside of it yelling to try to shame you and guilt you and all of that stuff. They don't want you to be able to order it from the comfort of your home and have it delivered and take care of yourself at home.
Right.
And when we did all of, we had a very, we had a very similar bill over the summer and into the fall that we beat, and that was Senate Bill 323. And when that bill came through, even then, we had a lot of people talk about these bills that want to stop abortion medication from coming through the mail. There's a huge impact on our rural communities, which
Yes.
in South Carolina, we have over 15 counties that don't have an OBGYN in them,
Yeah.
in really rural areas, but also people who are experiencing intimate partner violence, who
Yes.
might rely on needing to get that medication through the mail. Maybe they can't leave and go to a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's again on the face, it's like, okay, this is bad, but when you really start looking at all of these components of it, I mean, it's horrifying.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, the greatest risk factor for fatalities in pregnant people are their partners, is DV, domestic violence. So you're exactly right, having that anonymity. And I think that's really important. You know, earlier this year, I think it was February, on the federal level, we have started to hear help committee, health, education, labor, and pension, starting to even entertain telehealth, abortion access, and even
Mhm.
going as far as, you know, now openly talking about the Comstock Act, which
Yep.
would really start, you know, going through people's mails, making sure that they're not getting medication abortion through the mail, a surveillance state, really. So,
Yeah.
and thank you for bringing up Senate Bill 232, because I'm getting major deja vu with 1095. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
can you just speak a little bit about what happened in the fall last year with that bill, kind of where it fell
Yeah.
short? And if there's any differences, you know, sometimes they just reuse bills that died and then try and
Yeah.
get into a new session. But give us some of that kind of context and that background.
Yeah. So weirdly enough, Senate Bill 323 was introduced out of session. It was introduced out of session. They held like special subcommittee meetings and stuff. Starting late summer, they had one. We had with a bunch of other local organizations, Planned Parenthood, Ren, all of those. We had a huge rally. I think I mean, it was like hundreds of people
Yeah.
showed up, and it was like during the week. 323 was almost the exact same bill. It was the same thing. It was a personhood bill. It was, no exceptions. It was all basically the same bill. And we had two big rallies for it, the last one being on October 1st. And that bill didn't even make it out of subcommittee.
Yeah.
We beat it. We thought, great, we had to work over the summer and in the fall on some of the stuff we didn't think we'd have to,
Yeah.
but we've got it done and now we're good. And so to then, and over the winter, come into the legislative session, and here we have 323 basically again, just now it's called 1095. And in addition, they've added the anti-abortion medication parts to it as well. So that wasn't in 323 that now we have in 1095. But everything else is basically the same. And, you know, the big differences with 323 is that we had time to organize. We
Yeah.
had like weeks to get things prepared and to organize. And they, like I said, introduced this bill on the first. We found out this past Friday what day it was going to have a hearing, which was on Tuesday. So we had between Friday and Tuesday to organize. Then there was the hearing. They had the second part of the hearing yesterday, and then today it's in full committee. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's
It's moving fast.
bump, it's moving fast for such a big bill, and that definitely makes us nervous.
Yeah. And when is the legislative session end? Or when is it supposed to usually end?
So usually it's right around, I think, like the second week of May.
Okay.
And so I don't have the exact date in my head. But yeah, I think it's early second week of May. And so hopefully, we don't see an extension.
Yeah.
But of course it can go beyond that. But like I said, we have less than a month or right around a month left. And you know, there are so many big bills that they have been moving this session, bathroom bills and the abortion medication bill and bills on immigration and stuff that we haven't. We're kind of like getting a little nervous that we're here in the last month and we're like, are they just going to try to pass a bunch of these and just see what sticks?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what is the plan for the last month? So we're all a little bit kind of, keeping our heads on a swivel.
Yeah. It's kind of almost reminiscent of a votorama on the federal level.
Yeah.
They just have like a trillion bills and they just pull an all-nighter and go through everything. And it's by design to kind of wear you out and fatigue you, where you're just like, I'm not going to show up or cast a ballot or whatever. So then, it does end up getting passed. And I only ask about the end of the legislative session because I know you guys have been organizing. It's very grassroots. Um, Prior to coming on live, you had spoke about how you were, I believe it was Tuesday, you were rallying at the courthouse there in Columbia and Cola.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the rally? And then would love to kind of dive deep into Ashlyn's testimony in front of that committee.
Yeah. So, like I said, we found out on Friday when they were going to have this hearing. So, we had the weekend to organize something. And we also had heard, South Carolina has been pushing through one of these anti transgender bathroom bills. It's made its way through the House and the Senate. And so, we had heard that they might be talking about it on the House floor that day. So, we wanted to do something that was like totally encompassing bodily autonomy, wasn't necessarily just repro focused because there's, like you said earlier, just such an interconnectedness between gender affirming care and bathroom bills and repro. So we had just a rally with a bunch of different local organizations handing out resources and stuff. It was great. It was small, which it was 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. It's hard to, when you have just 3 days or so to get
Or-
people there. um, but it's always great to see that organizations come together and, just rally for bodily autonomy. It impacts so many different areas of our life. And so seeing the groups come together and see the intersection and, you know, participate in that with each other is always really nice.
Yeah, I think that's the way through, is through community coming together, all that kind of things. I know Ashlyn Prue testified on behalf of, S 1095. Do you want to just kind of speak to her talking points and a little bit about what she talked about? I believe they capped all testimonies off at 2 minutes.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was quick, but I do want to also platform her talking points here.
Yeah, one of the things that we knew we wanted to talk about were just some of the stories of, people that we have helped over the last couple of years and to really try to humanize the individuals who are seeking abortion care in South Carolina. You know, um, the way that I hear them, some of these legislators talk about, women who seek out abortion, it's with zero dignity, zero respect. They're murderers and all this stuff. And they're not. They're mothers and they're 13-year-olds. And um, every single call that we get, it is a person in crisis. Even if they feel 100% confident in whatever their decision is, or maybe it wasn't a trauma that led them there, they live in a state that wants to criminalize them. And so, them finding a way to navigate that can be very stressful. So, I know we really wanted to share the stories of, the people who we have helped, multiple women who have been later on in their pregnancy and gotten a fatal fetal diagnosis. And, you know, they like to talk a lot about exceptions. Well, we'll put exceptions in for that. And that all sounds great, but they rarely work in practice. I've been told by a legislator that it's because of all the woke doctors who are just trying to make a point. And so they're playing with people's lives to, make a point against these abortion bans and stuff. And it's like when you can't legislate for every single outcome, and because you can't, when you try to legislate for any of them, there's going to be gaps. And
Yeah.
so these hospitals and doctors trying to navigate these laws are really struggling. And so that's why we end up people having to travel, North Carolina, DC, New York, from South Carolina, um, to get the care that they need because they don't want to die.
Right.
And I don't think that's a crazy reason to get to want care. And so, really, Ashlyn really wanted to humanize the people getting abortion care, and also just contextualize the hoops that they have to jump. I mean, the barriers that are in place,
Yeah.
even again with exceptions, um, how hard it is. And it's not just, they love to say that women use abortion for birth control. And, I kind of like flippantly say it, but I'm like, well, you obviously don't know how much an abortion costs because birth control is a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
it's, lowest cost, you're looking at $600, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I don't have, most people don't have $600 a month laying around. So you know, it's really rough sometimes to listen to the things that some of these legislators are saying. And I think any chance that we get to share their stories or to humanize them in any way, it helps us.
100%. I think when you stop making such a, massive stereotype and you start actually seeing that, more than likely, statistically, the men who are in doing this legislation know someone who's received abortion care.
Oh yeah.
Statistically, miscarriage care is abortion care.
Hmm.
Whatever you semantics, it's abortion.
Right.
And what I really also, I have friends who are OB-GYN providers in Texas. I have friends in Georgia, and I even have friends who are in Pennsylvania who are getting a lot of these people coming from the South and treating. And I have heard the same thing over and over, that birthing people who vote for these abortion restrictions and who are in a very religious ideological way where it's against, their morals or whatever,
Hmm.
they're still getting abortion care.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
it's not just a certain group of people or like a very flippant group of people who aren't cognizant of their actions and consequences. I need you to know it's white, wealthy Christian women are also getting abortions.
Yeah.
And it's different because they generally have the resources versus people who are historically been held back through systemic racism, poverty, all those things. But I need you to understand that even people who vote against pro-choice and, are
Mhm.
more repro restrictive are also getting abortions. And I think there's that conversation. There's no judgment. You need to get the care that you need.
Oh
But to
yeah.
turn around and create legislation or vote against other people receiving the care that you can get is hard for me to negotiate in my mind. I think the mental gymnastics to separate that is very incredible. And I see that I'm very familiar with South Carolina and I like the culture. And I think I see that on a bigger scale because to me, it's a smaller state. I
Hmm.
think it's very interconnected more so
Yeah.
with that. But I just really quickly too want to talk about Representative Jermaine Johnson's testimony that he also spoke about in the hearing because we need more men allies. We need more people in power who don't have their rights taken back to be speaking on behalf of people who do. Can you just briefly tell people, kind of what he said? Again, he was very kind of cut off with the 2 minute mark, but
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, huge fan of Representative Jermaine Johnson, who I hope will be our next governor. And uh, one of the things that he talked about was, all the men that he sees on these committees making all of these decisions for women,
Yeah.
and there's only out of the 46 senators that we have, only two of them are women. And so you have all of these decisions being made by men. And he pointed out there was one woman in the room for the subcommittee hearings. And he pointed that out and said, there's, a lot of men in here making a lot of choices for something they will never experience. They'll never have to really worry about.
Right.
And, 51% of South Carolina's population can get pregnant. And so it's to have then such a huge majority of men who are making these laws, these bills, and then debating them. And the first time I ever heard a legislator try to explain what an ectopic pregnancy was, it was so surreal. I was like, oh, these are just normal people.
Yeah.
They actually are kind of dumb about things, and that's
Yeah.
okay. I'm ignorant about a lot of things too, but, they're, like, making laws, and I was like it was so eye-opening for me.
Yeah, and if that's one thing my experience on the Hill or even in rooms where I get to speak with board presidents like yourself or other people is, you know, people have their niches of where they are subject matter experts and they
Mhm.
could tell you everything, like you in South Carolina and repro care and community building. But then I see when they try to talk outside of that expertise and outside of that niche, and I'm like, oh, you are a fallible human being. You're not the
Yes.
end all be all. And it's like, you really don't understand. And it goes to underscore the lack of sex education that we have in our systems. Listening
Yeah.
to them talk about menstruation or anything like that, when women can get pregnant, it's just, and maybe that's something we're going to have to discuss because I know South Carolina has some very incredible, restrictions, same as the state that I'm in as well. But it really goes to highlight that lack of education when you hear men start to argue pros and cons of these legislation and bills. It really then
Yeah.
starts becoming more vibe based, really.
Yeah.
It's, what they kind of think or should be or whatever. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's mind blowing to me. That's why make sure that you have your voter registration, you are approved to vote. We've got a bunch of big elections coming up. So
And I
that,
have to shout out for anyone watching from South Carolina that for the first time in a very long time, we have a chance to elect a Democrat in every single district in South Carolina. There is at least one candidate for representative of every district. Some there's two or three, and so there will be primaries for Democrats in South Carolina, which is insane. And so everybody in South Carolina has a chance to replace some of these people and at least get us from a super majority down to a regular majority. That's the goal.
yeah, no, that would be absolutely incredible. And I think that's the first time in 3 decades. I can't
Something, yeah,
Something like that, where we have a Democrat represented in every single county. So, yeah, it's massive. I'm seeing change on the ground. I don't think people yet understand perhaps what the elections could start rendering, but I'm excited to see the number of people who are like, you know what? If they're going to be in these positions, I could do it.
yeah,
And they're starting to run for offices when they probably would have never considered themselves in a political
for
capacity.
sure.
No, that's incredible. And I, don't want to keep continuing talking about this, but really something I would love for you to just emphasize is the IVF component.
Yes.
A lot of these representatives ran on protecting access to IVF
Hmm.
via access to it in general, as well as making sure that it was covered by insurance. And I know that was a lot of what the current administration had already platformed on, when they were talking about reproductive rights, is protecting IVF. We're now seeing that come into the crosshairs as we start having the conversation of what fetal personhood really looks like, which is such a weird phrase for me to wrap my mind around. But we saw it in Alabama with,
Hmm.
where we're talking about how people are freezing their eggs and going about that process. But what are you hearing from families navigating fertility care?
Yeah. I think it's important for people to know that there are absolutely large groups of these, far extremist pro-birth groups who believe that IVF has created a holocaust of unborn children. They call it that. They consider themselves abolitionists who are here to protect all of these unborn lives. Again, these are language that they use. And so there is a not small sect of these people who believe that IVF is horrible. And I know that's hard for some of us to wrap our minds around. Um, I did IVF with my second pregnancy, and so I'm a little, more familiar with kind of the workings and everything. One thing that one of our senators, who she was the only female on the subcommittee, Senator Margie Bright Johnson or Matthews, brought up IVF and concerns that she had around the impact with IVF. And the chair said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about that because we have defined clinically diagnosable pregnancies, meaning that HCG is detectable in the body somewhere." And the problem with this is, and there's a lot of problems with the definitions because then pregnancy also has a different definition,
Yeah.
but it's a use of the term unborn child. And when we look at this legislation, specifically Senate Bill 1095, a lot of the criminalization around, on this bill is around an unborn child, which they
Yeah.
define as a single organism from the species of Homo sapien, from conception until live birth.
Yeah.
And so this is where we start looking at the criminalization of harm to an unborn child at the zygote phase,
Yes.
before even implantation. And that impacts fertility clinics because they create embryos often for IVF and they store them. It's not uncommon when you go through the IVF process to create more embryos than you might use. And you're kind of limited to how what you do with them. It's really expensive to store them. And so a lot of people will just have them discarded. And that is what a lot of these pro birth groups have a problem with. There's also, if you implant more than one embryo, sometimes after people have been trying for a while and it hasn't been successful, maybe they'll do two or even three. Well, all those embryos can split. And if you accidentally wind up with, a pregnancy with 8 or 9 embryos, there's a procedure called selective reduction, where some of them can be removed for your own health and for the health of the growing embryos.
Right.
And so that's, again, another area where fertility clinics can really potentially be liable, and the way that these laws are written and causing harm to an unborn child. And I think, again, it seems like one of those things that seems really far-fetched, kind of like when I talk about this and the impact on birth control. It's very reminiscent of when they told us, like, oh, they'll never turn over Roe, like that's you're over, like you're it's this drama, like you're over exaggerating and stuff. But it is all about the tiny steps that they take to get closer and closer to that. Personhood is a huge step in uh, restricting access to fertility treatments and birth control because it is, and Senator Richard Cash, the one who wrote this bill, has very publicly written and said that he is against birth control, that he believes most forms of birth control are an abortifacient.
Yeah.
And so we have to listen to what these people are saying and, really pay attention to where they're trying to slowly move the needle.
Yeah, you're right. The way that we are starting to change definitions and wording is how they lay the foundation for changing the access and legislation. You're 100% right. And
And
so,
I want to throw in too, because I forgot to say this. They've been challenged. If you say, because they say we don't want to impact birth control or IVF, and they've been challenged to then add protections into these laws. If you truly want to protect IVF, add, a section into 95 about, how this doesn't apply to IVF or embryos created for, and they won't. They won't add them. And for me, that's a huge tell.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're seeing that across the board. And I had Dr. Kimmy Chernoby on earlier. She's a lawyer and an emergency med physician, and she was talking about how they're trying to, her published piece talks about this, how they're trying to call birth control an abortifacient so that we can start changing Title 10. Like that's the groundwork for, and kind of like the canary in the coal mine for how they
Yeah.
perhaps could go about changing that legislation. Um, I think I fell in love with you at first sight from your Instagram, Messy as a Mother. Please go follow Carey for your incredible updates in real time. How real you are with what a lived experience is like. I see a lot of content creators who live outside of these restrictive states, grateful that they are platforming what's happening, but to report on it and to live it is something incredibly different. So I do want to shift now. You had kind of foreshadowed, given us an Easter egg about trans rights. I know South Carolina is starting to attack trans people. And I would love for you to kind of talk about, the legislation around bathrooms, all of that kind of stuff, and then how we can talk about in a second how that is really hitting close to home for you.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the session, there were a couple of anti-trans bathroom bills that were introduced that impact K through 12 schools, but also colleges and universities and any of the venues that they own. It's like if you want to go to a basketball game or football game. And we saw these in both the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, we have a bill that has passed through the House and the Senate. It's House Bill 4756. And when it was in the Senate, it unfortunately picked up some, this bill was already harmful, right? But it picked up some amendments I think are just cruel. Part of the initial bill was that there had to be a third bathroom option for transgender individuals. So if they weren't comfortable choosing between a men or a women's bathroom, a family bathroom, a unisex bathroom, something like that, had to be an option. And at campuses, there had to be a bathroom in every single building for a transgender individual to use. And in the Senate, they took away that particular part of the bill and said, well, it just has to be one bathroom on campus and it can be a temporary bathroom like a porta potty. So they want, and I mean, if you've been on any college campuses are huge. I went to University of South Carolina, easily take me 45 minutes to walk from one side of campus to the other.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm also thinking about game day. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm thinking
yeah, no.
day when you've got 90,000 people at Williams-Brice Arena
Mhm.
and the bathroom situation is already tight. Like the bathrooms are not as easy to access. So if you have the only restroom that a trans individual could use would be at the library, I mean, we'll see you in
Yeah.
3 days. You won't make it back for the
Oh,
game.
oh, right.
Like
Yeah.
that is so inhibitory to like a dignity and quality of life. So I
Yeah.
sorry, when you said just one on campus, I'm thinking, what if they go to game day? Heaven forbid.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, again, it's this, like we were talking about with abortion care, this total lack of dignity and respect for people having these lived experiences, who are just trying to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And again, when you push back on this, their story is, oh, men are going to put on dresses so that they can go in bathrooms and assault women and young girls. That's their story that they like to share. But when you push back on that and you say, well, actually, we know that 93% of assault perpetrated on children is by a family member, close family friend, teacher, coach, something like that. How are you going to address that? They don't like that because that doesn't fit their narrative.
Yeah.
And so, at the end of the day, the intersection is bodily autonomy
Yes.
and being able to just go to the bathroom and you use the bathroom that you are comfortable being in, that you don't have to worry about walking into and being assaulted, that you don't have to just go to the bathroom in peace. And again, them putting their noses and stuff in business that has nothing to do with them at all. And it's always funny to me because I'm like, isn't aren't you guys like the small government people? Aren't you the like no surveillance people? Like what is happening?
Yeah, it's definitely done a 180 with monitoring people and their
Yeah.
actions and their beliefs and everything. I know you spoke about being at the rally where you did have trans organizations and representatives. I'm so grateful to hear you all coming together and be a united front. And I was hoping too you could talk about how this is not just a matter relevant to the work you do with reproductive care, but how this actually impacts your personal life. I know on your Instagram platform, you've been very vulnerable with raising your children in this environment and kind of how they are starting to become into their own, personalities and exploring their own selves. Could you give us a little bit of insight on, your situation and how you're navigating that as a parent?
Yeah, so our middle child is 6, and we refer to him as being gender nonconforming. Very much born a boy, identifies as a boy, looks like a little girl, and loves it. Loves when I blow dry his hair, and he calls it his Princess Peach hair. So, this has been interesting to navigate as a parent and also as like an organizer slash activist who's on the ground, and who's talking to people. One of the things I tell people is that nobody anticipates having a trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming child when you are bringing a child into your home, whether it's through birth or adoption or whatever. You never anticipate that. You think about what is their first word going to be? Who are they going to look more like? What are they going to do when they grow up? All those kinds of things. You don't plan for anything else. And so, same as we did with our oldest, we, raised our middle child. And I mean, he was like 3 when he started wanting to wear dresses and paint his nails and stuff. And for us, we were like, okay, live your truth. And we saw the joy and the happiness that it brought him to feel comfortable in his own skin.
Yeah.
And so we've always nurtured that. And it's been hard to, sit into some of these subcommittee hearings and floor hearings and um, hear these legislators say that, trans people are mentally ill and, obviously they were sexually abused as children and that's why they're this way and they're praying for them. And um, when at the end of the day, as much as trans people just want dignity and to be treated with respect, I just want people to be kind to my 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want him to be in a situation where we're out in public and he needs to go to the bathroom and somebody's asking him for proof. That's the thing with this bathroom bill. We've asked, well, how are you going to police this? And they have no way of policing this unless you're going to ask people to pull down their pants.
Yeah.
And it's it's impacted the way we parent because when it was time for him to go into 4K in kindergarten, we knew we weren't going to send him to a public school in South Carolina. And this was before the bathroom bills and stuff had even been introduced. But just based on experiences that people who we've been in community with have had, even though our oldest was in public school, we knew it wasn't going to be safe for him. And now that these bathroom bills and stuff are making their way through, they're going to go to the governor's desk as early as today. possibly next week. But the version that passed was the Senate version of the bill that would only require a porta potty to be available on campus for trans individuals. Um, I'm extra glad that we've decided to keep our kid at a small private school. We were really lucky to find a safe, like-minded space for him where he can still be with other kids and do all the things, but he doesn't have to worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, as far as parents don't plan for this kind of stuff, and at the end of the day, they just want their kid to have a good childhood and enjoy life. Go swimming with their friends. I would love it if my sons could go to the same school together. It would be
Yeah.
a lot easier on me, and
I was thinking
you know,
logistics of daycare drop
it
off,
would
I'm
be
sure.
it would be a lot easier for me, and it would also, I mean, when I have, testified and written to legislators before about this, I tell them very, like, candidly, we don't have the money to pay for private school. Like, it's not something we ever put into our budget, we ever planned for. And we make it work. We have to make it work. We don't have a choice. And that's kind of a side effect of the way that these schools are being told they have to operate,
Yeah.
regardless of their individual preferences. And these bills that 4756, if schools aren't in line and aren't following with what they're supposed to be doing, they lose part of their budget.
Yeah.
So of course I don't blame them for doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
But again, it's just this dehumanization of people that keeps coming up and not really, you know, contextualizing and seeing, like, I'm just a mom. I'm just a mom who
Yeah.
has 3 kids and just wants them to have as easy a go of it as possible, you
Yeah.
know, and to have legislators just saying, you know, really unkind things about people like your child. It's difficult to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think navigating the safe spaces that your kid can go and feel their authentic selves. And it's very hard. I mean, culturally in South Carolina, it is very, very traditional. I think of low country and stuff being what I think of as like, good old boys, like that
Yeah.
culture
Mhm.
of now there's pockets. People are
Yeah.
creating their own spaces. I think where you're seeing a change. But in South Carolina, I do see so much of like the gingham, we're going to be very traditional and very kind of
Mhm.
set in that way. And so, one, kudos to you for recognizing your child for who they are and being able to be a safe space to foster their own authenticity. It's not easy. I'm sure
Mm.
you've probably received other people's thoughts on ways that you should be raising your child or things
Yeah.
you should not do. One thing in the South is we will give our opinion,
Oh, for sure.
and we will dress it up and bless your heart. Um, so, congratulations for you for keep kind of just really doing acts of love because that's what moves the needle and humanizing, like Ashlyn was talking about in her testimony, humanizing this reproductive care, humanizing trans people. Tell me you don't know a trans person by the legislation you create without telling me. You know what I mean? So thank you so much for highlighting that. Um, Man, I could talk to you for probably 3 more hours,
I
but
know.
I know you've probably got some work to do, catching up on 1095, where it landed and all of that. But I want to really close with Midlands Gives, because it's something that's a fundraiser right now that's happening. And if you're watching this, if you're watching the recording, go donate $10, whatever you have, because it's such an important organization. But I'll give you the floor to talk about Midlands Gives as well as the organization that is outpacing currently Palmetto State Abortion Fund.
Yeah. So A Moment of Hope is a local anti-abortion organization that protests outside of our Planned Parenthood every single day of the week. They're paid. They raise hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in fundraising and stuff. And their biggest contributor to their funds is through Midlands Gives, is where they raise the bulk of their money. And last year, their founder and executive director shot somebody outside of our Planned Parenthood. It was a bystander. So it wasn't anybody coming in and out of the clinic, luckily. He survived. He's okay and recovered and stuff. And that's still like a whole legal thing that is going on. But when that happened, we tried to have them removed from Midlands Gives because we didn't think it was appropriate for them to continue to be able to participate in this community fundraiser. And we were basically told, we can't discriminate against them, and they're going to stay. And so this year, Palmetto State Abortion Fund is for the first time participating in Midlands Gives, with the hope that for the first year in a long time, A Moment of Hope will not be the number one fundraiser. They are often the number one as in terms of how much money they bring in. And so we are trying really hard to outpace them. We did for a little while. We were so excited to knock them off of the number one spot. They've since then gotten a couple of large donations. That's kind of, it's funny because I think that they've gotten around 60 donations and are sitting around like $45,000. And we've gotten over 100, maybe even closer to 120, and like are around 25 $1,000. And so it really is those like small contributions that are just keep us going.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I always like to throw in that we are a volunteer run organization. We have one paid employee, and she's paid by a private donor. So all funds that we get in through donation go directly towards funding care for people in South Carolina and in other states in the South. It is, that has always been at like the foundation of what we want to do. Like we want our money to go to these people. And so if you donate, you're able to donate through Midlands Gives. Not only will you help us hopefully defeat an anti-abortion organization, but you'll get to fund abortion care in South Carolina as well. So it's like a win-win.
Yeah, it really is a win-win. Well, I believe I saw the cutoff date was in May. Is it?
Yeah, it's early fundraising right now. I believe May 5th is the last day. May 5th or May 6th is the last day of fundraising.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that insight. So yeah, please spread the word. I'm also going to create and include the link. I'll be posting it also to my notes, but when I send out this summary and the write-up, I'll be putting that in the show notes for sure. And then before we close out today, I have to ask one last question, and it's the one that I ask everyone. What keeps you going? What is your why?
Yeah, I mean, to be kind of corny, like my kids, like that's, honestly, that's the biggest thing is, my oldest son we adopted, and he's Mexican. My middle child is gender nonconforming. I had an unplanned pregnancy, surprise pregnancy with my third. So all of them have brought all these different components and aspects and stuff into my life, and it just is those days that are really hard and I'm really tired and I'm like, what's the point of all of this? They definitely keep me going. Also, just our community. It was we at the rally on Tuesday, I had people coming up to me and saying, because of your videos, like I'm here today, or I love watching your videos and I actually learned something. And that like gives me, such an ego boost and
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, I'll keep going a little bit, keep going a little bit more.
yeah.
And so seeing the impact that makes with my kids in the community is worth it to just keep going.
No, that's absolutely incredible, and thank you genuinely for the work that you do in your different organizations, the community building, the way that you live your life. I think it really is laying the foundation and paving way for a much better, equitable future for everyone listening. The link to support PSAF through Midlands Gives will be in the show notes again. And I'll be including all the information to follow Carey. Please go follow her, support her on her Substack as well, in Polite Company, which is just incredible. All of her articles have been so important and just a wealth of knowledge. Also, feel free to share this conversation. And yeah, spread the word about Palmetto State Abortion Fund. Thank you so much for being here. I genuinely appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
All right, take care. Bye, Carey.
Bye.